Vale. Sí, Maika, más para eso. Bueno, ya está. Welcome, bienvenidos, benvinguts to these talks, Friday talks. Today I'm very pleased to present, to introduce Valerio Sbragaglia. He's a colleague of us, so many of you know. He has been here with Juan de la Cierva Incorporación since 2019, correctly? 19? Yeah, I think this
20,
pandemic thing, it's, yeah, he's with us now for a while. And Valerio did his master's in the University of Barcelona. Then he did a PhD at UPC. And then he left Spain and went in 2 postdocs to Germany and to Italy, and decided to come back to ECM to join us at the resource department, marine resource department here at ECM. I'm going to read what he told me. He's a specialist in behavioral ecologist and with specialists in chronobiology and fisheries. And the most important is that he's pioneering the application of eCology and conservation culturomics in the context of marine recreational fisheries. That is what he's going to be talking about to all of us today. So with that, I welcome Valerio and thank you all for being here.
Ok. Thanks, Marta. Bon dia a tothom. M'agradaria molt parlar en català, però next time. Okay, so I'm Valerio from the Department of Marine Renewable Resources of the ICM, and today I'm going to present you how I'm integrating iEcology and conservation culturomics into my line of research. So many of you could associate me to this guy, the Norway lobsters, because it was the topic of my PhD here at the ICM some years ago. And also, I think I was one of the last ones to give a Friday talk before the pandemic on fisheries-induced evolution, which was one of the topics of my postdoc. So the line of research was quite successful. So you could be puzzling now because I'm presenting totally another thing, different topics. So I will give you some context on why I get engaged into this new research approach. And so some of the slides are scattered, but I hope you can see everything. So where it started? It started more or less in 2017 when I was at the IGB in Germany doing my postdoc, and I was started to be interested in recreational fisheries. So an NGO contacted me about an IUCN report on this species, the dentex, the common dentex, which is an emblematic and iconic species for many fisheries in the Mediterranean Sea. And this IUCN report was presenting data about a 30–50% of population decline of these species, and recommending strong measures without presenting data, just saying that there was a personal communication. And so this NGO was looking for some information about the recreational fishing of these species, and we started to explore this with some colleagues. Indeed, there were some data about commercial fishing, in particular in Italy and Spain. This species was highly fished in Spain in the 70s and 60s, then disappeared from the commercial fisheries and appeared in Italy. So strange commercial patterns, but none any kind of data for recreational fishing. And I was in a postdoc retreat in Germany with some colleagues, and I started to chat with this guy, Ivan Jaric, and he told me, yes, but if this is an emblematic and iconic species for recreational fisheries, maybe you can find data on digital platforms, such as social media. So he put me in contact with Ricardo Correia, another colleague of mine now, and we started to explore social media in search of information on the recreational fishing on these species. So it was out of curiosity at the beginning, but then I got engaged into this emerging approach, and that was, in that case, available to provide data about recreational fishing, which is in a data poor condition always. And also, I think what I like this interaction is the possibility of speak with other postdocs, because Ivan was a postdoc in my same department, I never spoke with him. So this out-of-the-office interaction was the key for engaging me in this new line of research. So these are some definitions to put you in context, because I use the words of iEcology and conservation culturomics, but probably you are not familiar. So culturomics is the study of human culture through the analysis of changes in word frequency in large bodies of text. And everything started with this science paper where the authors analyzed 4% of all books ever printed. This is just an example of many of the graphs they presented. Do not, let's say, take it seriously. It shows the increase of frequency of the words evolution, cell, bacteria, of DNA, and here you can see the word God that is going down. Conservation culturomics is using this approach, but looking at the human-nature interaction from the conservation perspective, understanding this interaction and looking for possible solutions, using these quantitative and digital tools. And while iEcology is the study of ecological patterns and also processes using data generated by other purposes and stored digitally. It means that the users that are generating the data are not aware that we are using those data for scientific purposes. So these are the cornerstone papers. This is a recent review by Jaric et al. On iEcology with the contextual framework and some of the examples through which we can use this approach to understand ecological patterns such phenology, distribution and range shift, and other macroecological patterns. While the cornerstone paper for conservation culturomics is from Ladel et al., 2016, and also you can find this very nice methodological review which gives you all the information to what kind of data and how we can use this data for conservation culturomics purposes. In this case, you can see a nice example of the occurrence of the word extinction worldwide. So these are digital applications that can have this wide geographical and spatial coverage. And most recently, we got engaged with other colleagues in providing the framework for the expansion of this methodology that started to be quite useful for the terrestrial realms to the aquatic realms. As you can see, we can use this as I'm doing for recreational fishing purposes, but also, for example, for understanding and quantify visitors' patterns in marine protected areas using hashtag published on Instagram or Twitter, for example. So something that is important to understand is that this is not a citizen science approach, because as I told you before for iEcology, citizen science or social surveys implies an active engagement, active data generations. So the citizens, the community, is aware that we are asking information for a scientific purpose. In this case, iEcology and conservation culturomics, it's a passive data generation. So the user is not aware that he's providing information for a scientific purpose. And these have raised a couple of important issues. The first one are the biases associated with this data and the possible limitations. And the other one is the ethical and privacy issues, which are quite important. So in my case, I was in 2017, 18, starting to integrate recreational fishing as a model system in my research. And so I explored, this is a recent paper showing the importance of this sector in Europe. As you can see, in Italy, Spain, we have at about 2% of the population engaged in marine recreational fisheries. It's a sector that in Europe is more or less practiced by 9 million of people, fishing at about 80 million days every year, with a total expenditure of at about 6 billion every year. And in particular, the importance of using digital data in this context is that we can characterize the activity, which is usually quite difficult to monitor because we need to use several methodologies that are quite expensive. And also that recreational fishers, as you can see, 9 million of people fishing at about 80 million days every year can represent a widespread network of observers. So if you are able to analyze the information they can provide, we can use this information as we are doing for citizen science to understand and integrate other ecological studies. In particular, we know that social media are integrated into recreational fishers' cultures, so what we can do in this example of a recent paper, sorry, because all the citations are cut, but this is a recent paper where we give two examples of two social media posts with a picture and a videos, and as you can see, we can retrieve many information regarding the fisher behavior, fish behavior, in many cases, many recreational fishers are provided information about the size or the depth of the capture, which can be interesting, you will see later. And also there are explicit data about the location and the time in which these catches are occurring or posted on the social media. But most importantly, the double advantage is that at the same time we have ecological information and social information. So the social engagement, likes, number of comments or number of views, and also we can access in an easy way the comments. So we can apply several digital quantitative applications such as content and sentiment analysis on the comments. And all these data are basically provided for free because they are available on the digital platforms. And so we can move around a sphere where we have, from one side we have the ecological aspects of recreational fisheries, and on the other side we have the social aspects. But most importantly, I think we can move at the intersection of these two dimensions, which is the most important and interesting aspects. So this is a snapshot of 1 minute on the internet last year. As you can see, at about every minute we have at about 30,000 subscribers watching Netflix, 69 million messages sent on WhatsApp or Messenger, but most importantly on YouTube, which is the social media I mostly use for my case studies, we have at about 500 hours of content uploaded every minute. It means that at the end of my talk, we will have at about 22,000 hours uploaded, new uploaded content on YouTube. So this is a huge volume of data. So let's have a look at what we did. For example, using YouTube, we use this systematic approach. So it's not just looking at the social media and extrapolating information, but we can use the application program interface provided by these platforms. Means that is a interface that allows us to download data in a systematic way. For example, in this case, we search for the word dentish and dectanx, which is one of the key species that we studied, and the application program interface gave us a series of information such as the video ID, the date, the channel, the title of the video, the description, the comments, dislikes, and many other information organized in a systematic way. And then we can apply filters, as we did in this case, looking for in the title and description and trying to divide two groups of recreational fishers between anglers and spearfishers. And as you can see here, we have this information organized. And the most important one are the title and description, because we discovered that many recreational fishers are providing the location and the size of the catch, but also the text of the comments that we can use for applying many other analyses. So let's move to the case studies. This is the first species that we studied in 2017, the common dentex. As you can see here, we were able in 2017 to download videos on YouTube since 2010, and we were able to, looking at the seasonal pattern of upload of these videos. So what this figure is suggesting is that we have a significant increase of videos uploaded on July by recreational spearfishers. And this is because recreational spearfishers are depth limited, so they can fish in the first 30 meters of depth. And this is perfectly aligns with the ecology of the species, which is performing bathymetric seasonal migration and is available in shallow water only during the month of July, according to scientific knowledge. So what this pattern is suggesting is that the upload of the videos is providing us information about the fisheries ecology. And this is something that we cannot see in angling because this group can fish this species at every depth during the year. And most importantly, in this case study, we discovered that many recreational fishers were providing the size of the fish, not just 5 kilos, 6 kilos, but they were weighing the fish. So they were providing up to the gram. And we were able to compare the size distribution among these two collectives. And the most interesting discovery was that before this study, many people were suggesting that spearfishing was more size selective than angling, but in this case we show that if we want to applying a management for this species and foster sustainable recreational fishing, we need to consider also the angling group, because it has more chances to catch larger individuals of these species. In a second case study, using the same methodology, we explored the recreational fishing in Italy of groupers. We were able to collect data about the most important species, in particular the dusky grouper, which is an emblematic species for conservation and fisheries. And we started to explore more ecological patterns for these species. In particular, for the dusky grouper, we use spearfishing data to explore the ontogenetic deepening. So this is a common pattern observed in many fish, also in freshwater, which is the larger individuals are living deeper than smaller individuals. And as you can see here, we were able to quantify this pattern for the dusky grouper in recreational spearfishing, but at the same time we ask another question. If this pattern, this is a target species for recreational spearfishers, so if this group is fishing and creating and governing this pattern by catching the larger individuals, and the larger individuals is moving deeper for being safe from spearfishing, we should see an arms race. So spearfishing is moving deeper towards across the years. But this is something that using this data, we are not seeing. Okay, so we can explore in a quantitative way this kind of relationship. And most importantly, this is, I think it's a very interesting ecological pattern because it's also governed according to several recent studies by climate change. So we can really combine fishery ecology and climate change using social media data with all the limitations applied to this kind of data. In the same study for the white grouper, which is a thermophilic species that now is extending the distribution to the north of the Mediterranean Sea, we show that the videos uploaded by recreational fishers were increasing the average latitude of the catches, suggesting that this species is moving to the north of the area of distribution. And most importantly, with YouTube data, we were able to fill in gaps of occurrences of these species in a very popular database of biodiversity occurrences data, GBIF, as you can see here. In green, there were the occurrences of these species previously known, and in 2019, we provided these new occurrences data. And in other cases, for another species of grouper, the dog-toothed grouper, Epinephelus caninus, which is a keystone species for deep sea ecosystems, such as seamounts. There were no data. If you look at the IUCN, this is a data-deficient species, so we don't have enough information for understanding the population trend. But here, as you can see, we were able to record the catches of larger individuals. This is a species that can reach 60 kilograms, so it's a huge species, and usually, as you can see, the catches oscillates between 100 and 400 meters depth. In terms of monitoring this harvesting activity by recreational fishers is quite complex because these are specialized recreational fishers, and only few of them are performing this kind of specialized fisheries. So if you look at the data collection framework of Italy or Spain, this species is never appearing. So with this kind of monitoring activity on social media, we can retrieve information that are important for the conservation of this species and deep sea ecosystem in particular. So now we can move into the social dimension of this kind of data and monitoring activity. So the first thing we did is plotting the social engagement of recreational fishers for the common dentex. You can see the number of views, likes, and comments after watching the videos here. And you can see that recreational spearfishers were suggesting to be more socially engaged with this content online. The same was occurring for the white grouper. And together with colleagues, we were starting to believe that this kind of approach was not very interesting because probably always recreational spearfishers are more engaged for some reasons. But then the bluefish arrived. And as you can see here, this species is a target of recreational anglers, and we can really see a difference in the social engagement for anglers. So what we are seeing here is that there is a species-specific relationship between the social engagement and this group of recreational fishers, which can suggest personal investment, targeting of specific species, and most importantly, what we can do is using the social engagement and combine that with ecological information, as we did for the common dentex. So we can see that here the size of the fish is a predictor of the social engagement, which is for recreational spearfishers in blue, but not for anglers. So this is suggesting that in the human dimension, if we want to managing recreational fishers, the size of these species is quite important for spearfishers, but not so much for recreational anglers. In this case, we moved into the usage of comments left by recreational fishers after watching the videos. I know that putting a table is boring, but there is a lot of information in here. What we did is collect comments, look at the comments by themselves, and categorize according to the subject the recreational fishers were speaking to the comments. For example, if there was a discussion about the fisher, a discussion about the fish, the technology, or other contents. Then we also categorize the dimension, if it was a positive, negative comments, or neutral, and also provide other information about the category and subcategory of the content. So you can see that we have a variety of themes that allow us to differentiate the content of discussion between anglers and spearfishers. For example, spearfishers are more engaged, are more speaking about the athletic performance of the fishing skills, something that is not happening with anglers. Jokes are more common between anglers. In particular, criticisms towards the pollution of commercial fishing are also, again, more common between anglers. Or maybe we can see that the criticisms towards the fisher behavior in killing the fish are more common between anglers. So all information that we can combine with other ecological information to really understand the human dimension to managing these two collectives within the context of recreational fishing. Now, I mean, this kind of things is quite time-consuming because you need to read all the comments. Sometimes we have thousands of comments and then categorize them, and could be quite, it's challenging sometimes. Sentiment analysis allow us to do more or less the same thing, but using a quantitative approach. So you need to invest a little bit of time in coding, but then scoring the sentiments of these comments is just a matter of few seconds. So this is a page of the sentiment analysis that we used. I put the web page of this guy because there was, just out of casualty, Palau de la Música Catalana on his web page. What a sentiment analysis is doing is associate positive or negative polarity and sentiments to specific words. So we can then use this vocabulary to score the comments or the text that we have in our hands. One of the most common examples is the run to the White House by Obama and Trump and the speeches they gave before the election. As you can see, Obama was using at about 60% of positive sentiment in his speeches, almost nothing about negative sentiments. By contrast, Trump was using more than 30% of negative sentiments in his speeches. And we all know how it ended. Okay? So I think this is a quantitative way to really understand a huge, large body of text that can give then insights into the human dimension of this text. In particular, the sentiment analysis, in particular the one we used in our case studies, is based on this wheel of emotions. So in one side, for example, we have joy, and in the opposite side, we have sadness. If we are in this inner circle, the emotion is stronger than in the outer circle. And then between these emotions, because, for example, between joy and trust, we have love, because it's a combination of these two emotions. You can find several categorizations of emotions, but I think this is one of the most commonly used. For example, if we want to score a sentence that probably all of you have used in your recent life, is this one. So los procesos burocráticos del SPIP son complicados, me agobio cada vez que tengo que hacer un trámite y hacer cosas sencillas como comprar un vuelo puede ser una pesadilla, ¿vale? So the nice thing about this sentiment analysis is that we have a variety of languages that we can use. So I use the Spanish language, the Spanish dictionary provided by this package in R, and I score this sentence. So the output that you get is 0 score for trust, surprise, and joy. So we are not expressing joy, neither anticipation nor disgust. What we scored is sadness, anger, but above all, fear. Okay? So that's what this kind of methodology can give us about a sentence like that. But if you have thousands and thousands of sentences, this can really help you in understanding what is the sentiments expressed into the text. So let's move to the last case studies where we apply this approach. This is the bluefish is a species native of the Mediterranean Sea, which is quite common in the southeast of the Mediterranean, but in the last decades is moving to the northwest. It arrived in Catalonia, I think, in the 80s, 90s, but in some areas, in particular of these case studies in Italy, is invasive. So the abundance of this species is huge and is provoking some effects that are unknown at the moment. So we characterized the ecological dimension of Italian recreational fishing of the bluefish, as you can see, at about 400 videos, but most importantly, we were able to download at about 9,000 comments. So when you analyze the comments, what you can do is removing all the nonsense words, all the stop words and conjunctions that are not useful for scoring sentiments. And the first thing that you can do is analyzing the frequency of the words that are mostly used by this collective. In this case, is recreational fishers. And what this graph is saying is that compliments, congratulations, thank you, video, hello, and the name of the fish are the most commonly words used. What it's saying us is that the most common comments is compliments towards the recreational fishers. Recreational fishers are answering thank you. They are speaking about the video, and they know each other. This seems quite intuitive, but the fact that they know each other is an important property if you want to draw a network of these people, a social network, because homophily, so the fact that people that know each other in a network and are commenting more often on social media data, I think it's an important characteristic that can be used then to engage with these collectives. I will show you later an example. But most importantly, what we can see is that some words are exclusively used by one group with respect to the other. And then from these 9,000 comments, what we can do is scoring, as you can see, thousands, almost 35,000 of sentiments. And this is the results. Overall, you can see that positive sentiments like trust, surprise, and joy are more common in recreational spearfishers, and this is perfectly aligns with a couple of studies that are saying that recreational spearfishers receive more activity satisfaction performing this activity. And by contrast, recreational anglers are expressing more fear, disgust, and anger. In particular, they are discussing each other within their collective in the way in which they are performing catch and release and the way in which they are treating the fish once he's catched. Most importantly, once we have this digitalized text, we can perform more advanced analysis. For example, in our case, in these case studies, we were interested into the invasive dimension of this species. So what we did in these comments, search for specific keywords. In this case, invasive, infestation, plague, and predation. In particular, predation is because the aggressiveness and predatory attitude of this species is giving a lot of satisfaction when this fish is fished by, in particular, anglers. And then what you can do with this kind of analysis, you can say to the software to extract the keyword and associate these keywords with 4 words before and after the keywords. So you can really put in context these keywords. And this is what we did in this table, where we put in context these keywords. And as you can see, recreational fishers say, this species is a pest. sooner or later our fish will be a memory. So they are complaining about the invasiveness and the arrival of this species, which is an important predator. But at the same time, for example here, it's a pest, but it's a very funny fish to fish. So we have a contrasting dimension because some of them are saying it's an invasive species, it's destroying our ecosystem, but on the other case, in the same collective, we have another group that is saying, okay, but I enjoy fishing it. So if we want to manage this situation, for example, the positive attitude and sentiments can be used to boost the fisheries of this species, but at the same time, we can use the negative sentiments to boost, for example, an eradication program, if this is what the management want to do. This is another application with a geographical gradient within the sentiment analysis. It's Lucia that did a high intro together with us last year, and now she's here and she's doing a postdoc with us in the context of future mares. And she did a great job in collecting more information about these species on social media. As you can see, probably it's not very visible, but we can really track the arrival of these species to the north of Italy. And we have also some records from Catalonia. I think there are 3 or 4 records of these species. And then what she did is run a sentiment analysis across a geographical gradient. So what she discovered is that if you look at the positive and sentiments and joy in particular, you can see it's not very visible from this graph, but the more you move to the north, the more joy and positive sentiments recreational fishers are expressing after catching this fish. So if you catch a white grouper in the north part of Italy where this species is rare, your sentiments on these social media platforms are more positive and express more joy than the guys that are fishing these species where it's common. Okay? Seems quite intuitive. It's intuitive, but I think it's the first demonstration of a geographical gradient of sentiments in the context of a social response to climate change. It is within a collective, which is recreational fishing, but I think it's quite interesting demonstration of the quantitative application of this methodology. So another thing that we did together with Lucia is to create a customized dictionary. So this kind of sentiment analysis run of general dictionaries based on English, usually in English languages. And so if you move in another context like recreational fishing or butterflies or whatever, different words can have a different connotation, in particular in terms of emotions. So what we did is take an original dictionary and create our customized dictionary. Using a focus group interview with recreational fishers, we use the wheel of emotions and we score again thousands of words. And indeed, if you run the same analysis with the original dictionary, you can see that you can get probably similar patterns, but the absolute values are totally different. So this is something that is quite important and was a step forward in applying this methodology in this context. So now the more skeptical of you, if I would allow you to ask a question, probably you would ask, okay, but are you sure that these social media are representing the real population of recreational fishers? What are the biases associated? And we compiled all these limitations in this figure that was recently published with some colleagues. You can see there are some dimensions to consider. One is data sources. So this kind of social media such as YouTube are considered dynamic cultural system. So dynamic because users can upload, but also deleting the data. So it's and also the algorithm of the social media itself can provide different output when we are searching for data. There is nothing we can do about that. There are strong ethical issues to consider, and also accessibility in terms of social cultural penetration of internet, for example. So you can find all of them here. We are aware of them, and we are moving the first steps to understand these limitations and also characterize some of the biases. In particular, what we did, this was together with Julia, that was an Erasmus student with us last year, and together with the monitoring of recreational fishing by ICATMAR, that is monitoring recreational fishes in Catalonia since 2019. So what we did is, using this monitoring activity, using traditional surveys, to characterize our recreational fishing community. And then we ask them face-to-face and using an online survey, are you sharing data on social media? So we can really characterize the demographic of recreational fishers that are sharing data on different platforms. And also, as you can see here, the guys that are sharing are obviously are younger than those that are not sharing. So we can really calibrate this bias. So this paper was quite dense because we controlled for several factors. But the summary is in here. So this is our population of recreational fishers in Catalonia. We used two different methodologies and asked them if they were sharing on digital platforms. And at about 37–38% of them are sharing. But when you look at the public or semi-public social media, this percentage goes lower, between 12 and 21%. So the penetration is not so high in terms of sharing. But if you're asking them if they are consuming content online, yes, more than 90% of them are consuming content. So if you want to run a sentiment analysis, what you are considering is more or less 90% of the population. Most importantly, this is the gender dimension of recreation fishing in Catalonia. And we characterize the profile of those that were sharing. In particular, they are more avid, so they are spending more days fishing every year. They spend more money in the during the fishing trips. And they have a higher harvest per unit effort. They are more efficient. They are more skilled, probably. And then they have a greater chances to catch a trophy fish. So when we are considering social media data for monitoring recreational fishing, we can calibrate according to this information, at least in Catalonia. And this was the first example of this kind of information for social media and recreational fishing. Now, I think this is the most important thing, is the legal issues associated for using a content of someone that is sharing this on a social media and is public, but from a legal perspective, you can see that there is an ongoing discussion with some old papers, but also some recent ones according to the strict restriction of the GDPR. We also have a reply on some content about that, and we provided a sort of mitigation strategy to be within the legal framework. First of all, we need to consider the terms of use of the social media that are changed quite frequently. So the message that you get from Twitter or Facebook that we updated our terms of reference, terms of use, that's what is occurring. Nobody, I think, read that, but the legal framework is in there. We need to consider that very carefully. Then the data processing and analysis, for example, the pseudonymization and the treatment of personal information that we are downloading, we must be treated very carefully. And in particular, at the moment of dissemination of the results, we need to consider that, for example, if Jaume is tweeting a picture of some of his activity, and we disseminate this picture on a paper, and we provide enough information to allow Marta to understand that this data is from Jaume, we could be in a legal problem. So the fact that data are public do not avoid us to use ethical principle of human subject research, and most importantly, according to the terms of use of many social media platforms, the people reasonable expectations of privacy. And I think these are new concepts, in particular within the context of the GDPR, which many of us do not understand very carefully, but in some cases, as in this paper, provide a very clear example of Facebook in the wrong use of some Facebook's posts. The Cambridge Analytics problem was one of them. But for research, we could be exposed to the same legal issues. So in terms of future application, I think there are many ways in which we can use this data within the context of recreational fishing, but I will not enter into the details because probably many of you are not so interested, but I think there is an overarching future application that we all as a researcher should consider. So we have this big differentiation I did at the beginning. So from one side, the citizen science with the active engagement with the community of citizens, and on the other side, we are not engaging with the community because we are passively mining data. So what we are seeing, in particular in recreational fishing and also in other contexts, is that the engagement in citizen science activity is going down because it's plenty of many projects. People probably cannot collaborate with all these projects, but what we can see is that the penetration of social media is going up, and the digital tools that we can use to understand this data are providing us more power to understand the meaning of this data. So what many scientists, in particular in the terrestrial realm, are doing is accumulate, calibrate this knowledge on social media, and then engage with stakeholders on social media, for example, using influencers. This is something that in social marketing is occurring every day. And then with this active engagement on social media, we can really try to change the digital culture, so affect behavior of our target group. So this is a very nice paper by some of my favorite authors that are evaluating the effects, the benefits and risks of social media for wildlife conservation. And this kind of approach, this loop is within these benefits from which we can use social media in conservation science. For example, there is an activity that we started this year, which is going in that direction. This is select and spear, so I'm quite interested in recreational spearfishing for behavioral ecology aspects, but also social aspects. And we launched this contest in which we have the support of several stakeholders, federations, lobbyists, platforms that are disseminating results, but also the most important brands. So what we are doing here is that we realize that on social media, there is a culture of this collective that is not reflecting the reality, and also they are performing a specific selectivity, psych selectivity of fish that is based on wrong belief. So they, for example, in their belief is saying that harvesting the larger fish is the most sustainable way to do spearfishing, but the scientific knowledge is telling the opposite. So what we are doing here is giving awards to the best videos that is transmitting the culture and the sustainable practice of this activity according to scientific knowledge, which is something that could boost the development of a new culture on social media of showing this kind of sustainable way to practicing this activity. It's just an example, and the way in which we are doing that is using influencers to disseminate these results on social media. And at the same time, these platforms allow you to have a control before the launching of this kind of activity, and so measure if you are really affecting the way in which people are disseminating this activity on social media. So I'm done, and I need to say thank you to Marta in particular, because at the beginning of my postdoc, this was not really planned, this use of digital data, but then the pandemic and then other aspects of my career path changed, and I think was a very nice couple of years of research. And Lucia and Julia, that were very important students in helping me with the development of this, and all my colleagues that are supporting the development of these new ideas, in particular in the context of recreational fishing. And I leave you with this slide, which are two websites that we are curating together with some colleagues, Conservation, Culturomics, and iEcology. And you can find important information, in particular an updated list of papers that are using this approach in several contexts, terrestrial and aquatic context. So if you are interested, you can have a look at these websites. And I'm done and open to questions.
Okay, thank you, Valerio. I find it fascinating, and the kind of things that you can do with that, no? It's almost infinitive. Any questions or comments? Curiosities? Okay.
Thank you, Valerio. I was wondering, probably there is a lot of things to explore, but one of the, for me, interesting things is about, within this sentiment analysis, the cultural bias. For example, I'm sure that the dialogue from anglers from Venice or Catania could be quite different, no mention if we compare with people from Finnish. So do you think that this could be one of the lines to explore. And also, as you mentioned, you search for dentists, dentice in Italian, but if you start searching with local names, different local names, I suppose that this can open a little bit the results in terms of, well, many things to explore on that.
I didn't show the results, but in a paper that we are collaborating with Lucia, actually is RTFM, we did that for the white grouper in Italy, France, and Spain. And in particular, we were able to compare the sentiment analysis of Italy and Spain. Yeah, probably we have a close culture, and the results were quite comparable in terms of frequency of sentiments. One of the ideas is to scale up this at the Mediterranean level, and there, I think, is where you can use this sentiment analysis to really differentiate, because I think across the Mediterranean Sea we could see a pattern of different sentiments towards probably the same species. For example, the bluefish, some colleague of mine from Turkey recently published a paper using the same methodology for the bluefish. In Turkey, in the Bosphorus Strait, which is called the Prince of Bosphorus. So if in Italy, Spain, it's an invasive species, but there is a strong cultural activity across, around this species. There is even a historical era based on the name of this species. So probably if you run a sentiment analysis there, the results will probably bias toward the positive perception of this species, because it has been always there. So yeah, it's cool, and yeah, it would be great to have the resources to do that.
Thanks, Valerio. Very interesting and scary, because you can use this data for good things, but also for other things. So it's scary. But I have a question, not from me, but it's people online seeing your talk.
Nice.
And as they cannot do it by YouTube.
Yes, because the comments are desactivated.
So I'm reading the question from Frances P. Ferrer. Thank you for a very interesting talk. I did not know about eEcology, but it may hold promise to unravel aspects of interest for ecology. Question, how do you validate the conclusions you obtain? Is there an independent method that can be used, or is it used?
Yeah, that's a pertinent question, and we have a couple of studies ongoing that I didn't show the results because are quite exciting. And what we are doing at the moment, in particular for the white grouper, because it's an interesting example of an ongoing distributional range shift. So we can really track real time. And so what we are combining here is social media data from YouTube, the classic local ecological knowledge. So we are asking recreational fishers to compile a survey. Then we are using GBIF as a source as a repository for the occurrence of these species, and combining with scientific records of these species. And so I think this kind of 3-4 ways combination of data, what it's saying is that YouTube data can be used are describing the ongoing distributional range shift in a similar way of the most commonly scientific records or local ecological knowledge of fishers. So I think in some cases can be validated, in other cases it's not so easy, but it's always a bias that we need to consider, so in our case studies. For the white group, I think we are in a good position to say that this is real and is describing a real phenomenon in a good way. But in other cases, yeah, it really depends from the collective that we are using. In this case, we have a lot of knowledge about recreational fishing, but probably if you are looking for migration of butterfly, I don't know.
Thank you for the interesting talk. You were explaining about the community of fishers, recreational fishers in Catalonia, but I would think that many of them are foreign tourists. So would that, like from British coming here in the summer to fish or something like that, do you take that into account, or how would that influence?
Yes, I didn't present the data about the people if they were tourists or not, but we have this information for two reasons. The first one, the face-to-face interview, we can ask them. and the online interview is sent to all the people that have a license. So when they ask for the license, they mark a box from the country in which they are living. Yeah. And we have this information. I didn't show the results. And I think, if I'm not wrong, there is nobody from ICATMAR here, I think at about 18% of the online questionnaires are from people that are living abroad, not in Catalonia.
Not so much. And I had another question to finish. I would think that if you catch a grouper of, like, let's say 5 kilos, what do? I mean, to what extent is that in recreational fishery? Because I would think that they sell that to restaurants or something like that.
It's a hot topic now. In the context of recreational fishes, you are not allowed to sell fish or exchange it. So the idea is that they consume it by themselves. So I cannot say. For example, I'm collaborating a lot with the interdisciplinary laboratory in Helsinki University, and they were pioneering this approach for tracking wildlife, illegal wildlife trade in Africa. So all the people that are commercializing animal products from Africa into the world. Okay? And they were able to discover some hot points and hubs of the selling of these products. But in terms of harvesting, we cannot say, because what you see on social media, you have this expectation of privacy that you cannot conclude 100% sure that it is illegal. So you need to perform another kind of analysis, but I think it's more a police activity than a research activity, because we are moving in a very hot context.
Muy chula la charla, ¿eh? En español porque es muy complicado.
No, bien.
Que, claro, yo pienso que yo ahora, por ejemplo, yo actúo diferente ante las redes sociales porque pienso que me pueden estar controlando de alguna manera alguien, entonces evitas decir según qué cosas. Es decir, hay una censura, en países hay censura dirigida, que no te dejan decir según qué cosas, pero también hay una autocensura personal asociada a que también vamos mejorando nuestra capacidad de opinar sobre cosas. Claro, todo eso también puede afectar mucho cómo tú puedes llegar a realizar diferentes conclusiones. Si en el país o en la zona puede haber una censura hacia unos comentarios que pueden ser ofensivos y ahí están censurados, claro, eso como lo...
Esto no...
¿No puedes controlarlo o lo controláis de alguna manera?
De momento, el contexto geográfico donde hemos trabajado es Italia, Francia, España. Y, por ejemplo, en Francia, no se puede pescar el mero, en general. ¿Qué pasa? No hemos encontrado vídeos de pesca al mero blanco, aunque el mero blanco está permitido. Este es un tipo de censura, ¿no? De bias. Pero respecto a lo que dices tú, no lo hemos considerado de momento. Lo que estamos haciendo ahora en Cataluña es preguntar a los pescadores recreativos no solo si comparten o no, pero por qué comparten y por qué consuman contenido en social media. Y lo que hemos visto, hay 3 grandes grupos. Un grupo que es compartir para tener un engagement con los peers, so show up, basically. Another group que busca información, novatos, se acercan a una nueva actividad y van buscando información. Antes eran en un club de manera presencial, en un curso, y ahora buscan información en un YouTube, por ejemplo. Y detrás de esta demanda hay la oferta. Hay gente que va publicando tutorials y cursos de pesca, así que hay estos 3 grandes grupos. Quien da clases, quien recoge esta información, y otro grupo más grande que son los que comparten para engage con los peers. Pero en términos de biases y censuras no hemos entrado todavía. Así que es probable. En social science está muy bien descrito el comportamiento de colectivos en social media, pero no para este contexto. Así que no sabría si hay una dinámica específica de esta comunidad.
Yo mismo he cambiado mi actitud también en grupos de WhatsApp, de hacer bromas que antes haría, ahora no haría, pero que igual también en este punto de vista, comentarios que a lo mejor puedes llegar tú a pasar a un sentimiento que se reduzca ese comentario fuerte hacia, yo qué sé, yo pienso en un pescador un spearfishing que, bueno, pues, que puede hacer un comentario muy grotesco al principio, pero a lo mejor esa persona también va creciendo, también va dándose cuenta que esos comentarios grotescos ya no son tan bien vistos socialmente y ya no los dice. Pero
es probable.
Puede pensar lo mismo.
Es probable.
Digo,
Sí, es probable. No hemos entrado en este aspecto tan fino, decimos que...
Hay que compararlo con la Deep Web, ¿no? Si se comparte información en la Deep Web, hay que compararlo y ver cómo... Más... a ver...
Hello. So about the like sentimental part of how the people feel about fisheries, for example, have you investigated the possible effect of the YouTube, for example, algorithm that will probably promote like videos of spearfishing of people already convinced it is a good thing to do spearfishing or are already passionate by spearfishing? Have you tried to investigate the possible effect? Because it will be interesting to know, for example, what the population could think about certain fishing activities, and not only what already passionate people about fishing think about their own activities.
So I think that one part is the algorithm. So there is nothing we can do with the algorithm.
Okay.
So the application program interface, you need a specific keywords for accessing this application. And what we did is creating a keyword not associated to our Google account. Because usually if you associated this keyword to my Google account, I will get the algorithm reacting to my Google activity. So the keyword is neutral. So there is not information that Google can use to give us a personalized reply from the algorithm. The algorithm, we cannot do anything about that. But with the application program interface, what we did is cutting the mining exercise in small time windows. So we were able to collect as much as videos as possible within these small time windows. So in this case, probably you reduce the bias of the algorithm, giving you the videos that according to them is the highest score. And probably, I think now there is a function in which you can select the way in which the videos are gave you by the application program interface, which is not the relevance, but is for example, the time in which they are uploaded. So there are some things in which you can bypass that, but in reality, we don't know what the algorithm is doing. So, and the other question, I didn't get the second part.
No, it's
it's just this one, no?
That was it. Thank you.
So, yeah.
Celia, tú tenías...
It was just a comment, but maybe it's a personal feeling, but the name of eCology, I have difficulties to this term. Why not e-data science? Because most of the surveys, you could not end with ecology question or answer or whatever. Why not e-data science at all?
I was not in that paper, so I think we should ask Ivan.
But we are also, how you say, responsible to use a word that
yes.
we are not agreeing with.
In my case, this word, this definition, let's say, give me a specific context, which is that I'm using digital data published by users without the knowledge of this activity can produce a scientific insights. And this can be an individual user data, such as a post on social media, but also aggregated data. For example, we are using Wikipedia page views or Google search volumes, which is produced by users, but in an aggregated way. So I cannot see your activity, such as on social media. I can see an aggregated activity at the regional or national level. But regarding the definition, I understand your point, but I don't know. In my case, it helps me in moving in a specific context. But now there is parasitism and many other things. So we are in the high moment.
It's used for everything. You can find ecology.
Yes.
Valerio, just a suggestion about the previous question. Yeah, you use neutral Gmail account, but what about to create several, profiles? One that it's in favor of spearfishing, another that is completely against spearfishing, another's neutral, another in favor, things like that, and apply with these different ones. So when you retrieve, you can have different, information regarding different, but this can give you sometimes extra information that could give you some extra view, So you're like applying the algorithm with different views and with different, and maybe that can give you some.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I would say that it would be difficult to control how much in favor, how much against.
Well, but you could do it artificially. Imagine that you create a profile
Yes.
and you start, creating by yourself in several, fora, comments always in favor of the spearfish, and in other profile, always you provide, comments completely against a spearfish and things like that. So Google somehow, they say you are completely in favor, you are completely, against that, and you can even create a kind of range of different profiles.
Yes.
Well,
no, it's a good idea, but what scares me is that you cannot control how the algorithm is scoring your profile.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what is doing.
Just by try and error, you can obtain, because I'm sure that maybe you can create, artificially many comments in many places, and you can...
like a bot. Okay, yeah. I see. Yeah, you are in the new era already. Too much for me, probably. But yeah, it's a good idea to have this kind of treatment in the mining of the data. Yeah.
More comments, questions? Otherwise, we'll finish here, and thank you very much for coming today.